Humanity's heart beat in a frenzy as the galaxy teetered on the edge of an all-out war. The Exhalar Dominion, an ancient and technologically advanced alien empire, had declared Earth a threat to the balance of the galaxy. The Dominion, with its vast fleet and unyielding militaristic ethos, viewed humanity's rapid expansion and unpredictable behavior as a ticking time bomb. It was only a matter of time before the conflict that had been simmering for months would erupt into full-scale war. On Earth, President Evelyn Tran stood before the Council of Nations, her hands clasped behind her back as she surveyed the room. The air was thick with tension. Global leaders, military commanders, and diplomats waited for her to speak, their faces drawn tight with concern. The situation was dire. Earth's outer colonies had been attacked by Dominion warships, and retaliation was imminent. Only one option remained: negotiate a ceasefire before it was too late. "Madam President," said General Lucas Keller, the head of Earth's military forces, his voice low and heavy with urgency, "we don't have much time. The Exhalar fleet is already moving toward our border systems. If we don't act now, they will have full control of our colonies. This is our final chance to act before we're pushed into war." Tran's gaze hardened as she met his eyes. "I know, General, but we need to be careful. If we launch a counteroffensive without a diplomatic solution, we risk alienating our only potential allies." The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over them. In the past weeks, her diplomatic team had been reaching out to other galactic factions, including the elusive Virith, an ancient race that had long remained neutral. The hope was to form an alliance that could pressure the Xelar into reconsidering their course of action. But that window was closing rapidly. "Is it even possible to negotiate with them?" asked Ambassador Tessa Yoon, one of Earth's most experienced diplomats. She leaned forward, her voice tinged with doubt. "The Exhalar view humanity as an infestation, something to be eradicated before it spreads. They will never negotiate on equal terms." "That's not entirely true," interrupted Captain Naomi Davy, the leader of the Crimson Vanguard, Earth's most elite Special Forces unit. Her tone was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "There are factions within the Dominion who don't want war. I've seen the intelligence. There's a splinter group led by General Cale Vorb. He's been leaking information to us, trying to destabilize the war effort from within. If we can contact him, we might have a chance." Tran's heart quickened. The possibility of an internal division within the Dominion had always seemed unlikely, but with the stakes this high, she had no choice but to consider it. She turned to General Keller. "Prepare the fleet. We'll need to defend our borders, but I want you to send a small team to make contact with Vorn's faction. If there's any chance of peace, we need to take it." "Understood, Madam President," Keller replied, his jaw set in grim determination. As the room emptied and the hum of urgency filled the air, Tran couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. Every moment counted. She knew that even the smallest misstep could lead to total war. The fate of Earth hung by a thread, and she was about to walk the tightrope. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, General Cale Vorm stood in the shadows of a dimly lit war room aboard a Dominion cruiser. He had made his choice, to stand against the war machine that sought to destroy Earth. But with every passing moment, the risk of betrayal loomed ever larger. His allies were few, his enemies many, and the weight of his decision pressed down on him like an anvil. He stared out at the stars, a flicker of hope glimmering in his eyes. Could peace truly be possible? Or was he simply a fool, trying to change the course of a galaxy on the brink of chaos? Only time would tell. The briefing room aboard Earth's flagship Elysium buzzed with tension as President Evelyn Tran gathered her most trusted advisors. The urgency in the air was palpable. Every second was critical. The attack on Earth's colonies had intensified in recent days, and with the Dominion fleet steadily advancing, there was no time to waste. Yet, amidst the growing chaos, a sliver of hope had emerged. General Cale Vorm's message had come through like a spark in the dark, a glimmer of possibility. A defector from within the Telor military, Vorm claimed to know critical secrets about the Dominion's leadership and was offering his knowledge in exchange for sanctuary. But there were risks. Vorm's faction was fractured, and his enemies within the Dominion were ruthless. His message also hinted at a possible internal rebellion within the Telor, one that could change everything if humanity acted swiftly enough. "Madam President," said Admiral Jacob Thorpe, his voice gruff as he stood before a holographic display of the galaxy. "The Dominion's warships are advancing on our outer colonies. If we can't make contact with Vorm's faction and gain his intelligence, we're looking at the complete destruction of our forces. But if we move too boldly, we risk tipping off the Dominion. We need to act carefully, or it's game over." Tran nodded, her face grim as she considered the situation. "I agree. If we misstep, we lose everything." She turned to Captain Naomi Davy, leader of the Crimson Vanguard, the team tasked with bringing Vorm's information to Earth. "Captain, your team is our last hope. Get him off the Telor ship. Alive. We can't afford failure." Davy's sharp gaze met Tran's. "Understood, Madam President. We won't fail." With a small team of elite soldiers, Davy was given the mission to infiltrate a heavily guarded sailor cruiser, intercept Vorm, and extract him without drawing attention. The mission was risky, but it was their only chance to secure an advantage. Meanwhile, on that sailor cruiser Vorgel, General Vorm paced in his quarters, frustration and doubt gnawing at him. He knew the risks of contacting humanity. If the Dominion's loyalists discovered his intentions, he would be executed without question. Yet the desire for peace, for an end to the senseless bloodshed, outweighed the fear of death. His message had been sent, a desperate plea for humanity to trust him. But the Dominion was unpredictable, and there were no guarantees. The power-hungry elites within his own ranks, including Supreme Leader Zorath, would never allow a peaceful resolution. Vorm had to act quickly if he was going to change the course of history. "Time is running out," he muttered to himself, his hand tightening around the hilt of his blade. He had sent a coded message to Earth, but he knew the clock was ticking, and the war was coming for both his people and theirs. Back on Earth, the Crimson Vanguard began their covert mission to infiltrate Vorgel. Captain Davy led her squad through the shadows of the Xelor-controlled space station, their every step calculated, every breath measured. The stakes could not have been higher. As they neared the docking bay, Davy's communicator buzzed with an update from her intelligence officer. "Captain, we've got a problem. The Dominion's internal security just escalated. Vorm's message has been detected. They're on to us." "Damn it," Davy muttered under her breath. "Move out now. If they know we're here, we don't have much time." With silent urgency, the Crimson Vanguard advanced, knowing that if they were caught, Earth's hopes for peace would crumble before they even had a chance to form. The tension was suffocating as they reached Vorm's quarters. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the general standing there, his posture rigid with resolve. His dark eyes met Davy's, and in that moment the fate of the galaxy seemed to hinge on the fragile trust between them. "We don't have much time," Vorm said, his voice low. "The Dominion's security forces are closing in. If you're going to get me off this ship alive, you'll need to move quickly. But there's more you need to know, something even more dangerous than Zorath's war." Davy's pulse quickened. What's worse than war? Vorm's gaze hardened. A galactic conspiracy. The Dominion's leadership is being manipulated by something darker. Something that could wipe out both our worlds if we don't act. The air aboard the Vorgel was thick with the hum of an impending storm, as General Vorm's words hung in the air like an unanswered question. Captain Naomi Davies' team had successfully infiltrated the Xelor cruiser, but now, with the stakes higher than ever, they were on the brink of unraveling a far more dangerous mystery than they could have anticipated. Vorm led the way through the dimly lit corridors of the warship, his movements sharp and precise. He had once commanded this vessel with unwavering loyalty to the Dominion, but now every step felt like a betrayal. The loyalty he had once held for the Taylor Empire was quickly being replaced by a grim understanding of the truth. The Dominion's leadership was under the thrall of something far darker than a mere desire for galactic conquest. There was something more insidious, something that threatened not only Earth and the Dominion, but the entire galaxy. Davies' voice broke the tense silence. "What are you talking about, General? What's controlling the Dominion's leaders?" Vorm's expression hardened as they turned a corner, his eyes darting over his shoulder to ensure they weren't followed. "It's not just Zoroth, the supreme leader. There's an ancient power within the Dominion that has been manipulating events from the shadows for centuries. A power older than the Xelor themselves. I've seen their signs, the influence they have on Zoroth and others. This isn't about territory or resources anymore. They're trying to bring about something far worse, a cataclysm." Davies' brow furrowed. She knew the Dominion's military was formidable, but the thought of an ancient power guiding their every move sent a chill down her spine. A cataclysm. What are they planning? "I don't know all the details," Vorm replied, his voice tight with frustration. "But I've uncovered enough to know that it's not just the warships we need to worry about. They have weapons, biological, technological, things that can reshape entire systems. Their goal isn't simply to dominate, it's to reset the galaxy itself." Captain Davy felt the weight of his words. This was no longer a simple matter of negotiation or diplomacy. Humanity's struggle for survival had just become a fight against a far more ancient and dangerous force. If Vorm was right, the Taylor were being used as pawns in a much larger game, and Earth was about to be caught in the crossfire. "We need to get back to Earth and warn the President," Davy said urgently, her mind racing. "If the Dominion is under the control of something like that, we can't just fight them. We need to understand what we're up against." Vorm nodded, his face grim. "I have information that can help you, but it's not safe here. We need to leave before we're discovered. My faction is fractured, but I've been in contact with others who may be able to help. If we can reach them, we might stand a chance." As they made their way toward the escape pod bay, a series of blailing alarms cut through the tense quiet, signaling that their presence had been detected. The Xelor fleet was closing in on them, and every second counted. "Davy, we have to move." "Now," Vorm hissed, urgency in his voice. The Crimson Vanguard moved as one, their training kicking in as they sprinted down the hallways, avoiding patrols and the increasingly frantic security measures. Davy's mind raced as she processed Vorm's words. The Dominion's warships were bad enough, but now they were faced with something much worse. An ancient power manipulating the galaxy's most powerful empire. It was almost too much to comprehend. When they reached the escape pods, Vorm turned to Davy, his eyes locking with hers. "You need to understand something, Captain. The Dominion isn't the real enemy. The force behind them, the one that controls everything, it's something even older than that Taylor. They've been waiting for centuries to enact their plan. This is bigger than any war. This is about the future of the entire galaxy." Before Davy could respond, the pod doors slid open, revealing the cold void of space beyond. The last vestiges of the Vorgel were fading as they prepared to launch, but a sense of urgency overwhelmed her. "Let's go," she ordered, pulling Vorn into the pod, followed by her team. With a quick motion, the escape pod doors sealed, and the ship's engines roared to life. They blasted away from the Tellar cruiser, the darkness of space swallowing them whole. As the Vorgel drifted behind them, Davy's mind was filled with one burning question. What was this ancient force, and could humanity survive the storm it was about to unleash? The escape pod hurtled through the cold vacuum of space, the faint hum of its engines the only sound that could be heard. Captain Naomi Davies' heart raced, her mind still reeling from the revelations General Vorn had shared. The Dominion was no longer the sole threat. There was something far more dangerous lurking in the shadows, manipulating events with an insidious hand. An ancient power, older than that sailor, was behind the scenes, and it wasn't just the galaxy's fate that was at stake. It was the survival of every sentient being in the galaxy. As the pod accelerated toward Earth's nearest outpost, Davy turned to Vorn, who was seated across from her, his expression tight with worry. His past as a Dominion general weighed heavily on him, and every word he spoke seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime of regret. "What's the name of this power?" Davy asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside her. "What do we call it?" Vorn shook his head slowly, his eyes distant, as if he was still trying to make sense of the complexity of the situation. "It doesn't have a name, not one that I know of." The Dominion's elders referred to it as the Eclipsed Hand, a force that has been guiding their leaders for centuries. They're ancient, older than any known civilization in the galaxy. The Taylor were once their greatest allies, but over time, that alliance shifted. The Hand has grown more insidious, more dangerous, and now it wants to reshape the galaxy. Davy processed the name, feeling the chill that spread through her veins. The Eclipsed Hand. It was the kind of name that suggested something far beyond conventional understanding. Something that manipulated not just governments or empires, but the very fabric of the galaxy itself. Admiral Jacob Thorpe's voice came through the communication channel. "Captain Davy, this is Elysium. We've detected your escape pod. Prepare for immediate docking." "Understood, Admiral." "We're coming in now," Davy replied, turning her attention back to the team. They were all on edge, knowing that even though they had escaped the Vorgel, the real danger was still out there, waiting for them. The Exilor fleet was bound to follow soon, and with them, the mysterious force that Vorn had warned about. As the pod docked with the Elysium, Davy quickly assessed the situation. Earth's flagship was one of the last bastions of humanity's strength in this galaxy, and it was under constant threat. With Vorn's information, they had a chance to act, but they needed to move fast. Every moment of delay could be one more step toward disaster. Vorn stood, his posture stiff, as he followed Davy and her team into the ship's command center. President Evelyn Tran was waiting for them, her expression unreadable, but her eyes sharp as ever. She had received the news of their mission's success, but the tension in her gaze suggested that she was already processing the next step. General Vorn, President Tran greeted him with a nod, though her voice betrayed no sign of trust. She knew this was a dangerous game, and the cost of failure was unimaginable. "We've heard your message. The Eclipsed Hand. What are we dealing with here?" Vorn's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he saw the gravity in her gaze. She understood the stakes, perhaps more than anyone. "What I've told you is only the beginning. The Dominion's leadership is a puppet to this force, and they're poised to take action, to reshape the galaxy into something unrecognizable. We need to act quickly before they initiate their final phase. Final phase? Davy asked, stepping forward, her voice filled with urgency. What do you mean? Vorn grimaced. The eclipsed hand controls far more than the Dominion. They've been manipulating the galaxy's balance for centuries, pulling the strings behind various empires and factions. The Exhaler are their most powerful tool, but they're not the only one. There are sleeper agents, people in every major power, ready to strike when the time is right. The Hand has its sights on Earth, and they're not just planning a military assault. They want to destabilize everything, governments, economies, alliances, until they can impose their will on every system. Davy felt her blood run cold. So it's not just a war we're fighting. It's a war for control of the entire galaxy. Vorn nodded grimly. Exactly. And if we don't act now, Earth will become the first target in their effort to collapse the galaxy's order. We need to find their source, destroy their grip on the Dominion before it spreads to other factions. Tran's fingers tightened around the edge of the table, her face hardening with resolve. Then we have no choice. We'll have to fight this hidden war, and we'll need every ally we can find. The fate of the galaxy depends on it. Davy knew it wouldn't be easy. They had just begun to understand the true scale of the war they were in. But if Vorn's words were true, then humanity's greatest battle had only just begun. And this time, it wasn't just about survival, it was about rewriting the future of the entire galaxy. The command center of the Elysium hummed with activity, a controlled chaos that marked the beginning of humanity's most crucial mission. As President Evelyn Tran convened with her advisors, Davy stood at the center of the room, her mind racing. The revelations about the eclipsed hand and the stakes they were facing made her pulse quicken, but there was no time for hesitation. Every second counted. Vorn, still in his Dominion uniform, stood apart from the others, his face a mask of determination. He had shared everything he knew, but Davy could see the wariness in his eyes. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was the fight of his life. His loyalty to the Dominion had already been shaken, and now he was part of a mission far greater than any military campaign he had ever led. The weight of that responsibility was evident. We've identified several potential sources of the eclipsed hand's influence within the galaxy, Tran said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. They are hidden deep within the highest echelons of several major powers, Sailor, Dominion, and even the Krell Syndicate. But these factions are too dangerous to move against all at once. We need to make our moves carefully. Davy nodded, her eyes scanning the tactical map that had just flickered to life. The galaxy's key political and military systems were marked with red circles, each one a potential target or ally in the battle ahead. The stakes were enormous, and every faction had its own vested interest in maintaining the status quo, unaware or uncaring about the shadowy force that sought to rewrite the rules. What about Earth? Davy asked, her voice low, as if speaking the truth aloud would make it even more real. The eclipsed hand has already infiltrated the Dominion. What's to stop them from doing the same here? Tran's gaze hardened. That's why we're moving now. We can't afford to wait for them to make the first move. We need to expose their influence before it's too late. I've already initiated contact with several factions who oppose the hand. If we can bring them to our side, we stand a chance. Vorn's eyes flicked to the map, his expression darkening. It's a dangerous game you're playing. The eclipsed hand's agents are everywhere. I can't guarantee that any of these factions are truly free from their reach. Davy met his gaze, understanding the weight of his words. The general was right. They couldn't trust anyone. The hand's influence had likely permeated every corner of the galaxy, and any alliance they formed could be compromised. But they didn't have a choice. Time was running out, and the risk of inaction was far greater than the danger of potential betrayal. "We don't have the luxury of perfect allies," Davy said, her voice firm. "But we do have one advantage, our ability to move quickly and decisively. We can't fight this war in the open. We need to be like ghosts, striking at the heart of the Eclipsed Hand's operations before they even know we're coming." Tran nodded. "I'll begin coordinating the diplomatic efforts immediately. But we'll need something else. Intelligence. Something we can use to infiltrate their ranks and find their true source of power." Davy looked at Vorn. "You know the Dominion better than anyone. You've seen their leadership up close. If anyone knows how to reach the heart of the Eclipsed Hand, it's you." Vorn hesitated, his brow furrowing as he considered the request. "It's risky. The Dominion doesn't take kindly to deserters, especially not ones with the kind of knowledge I possess. But you're right. I can't sit idly by while they destroy everything we fought for. I'll provide whatever intelligence I can. But we'll need a team, someone who can get close to the key players without being detected." Davy's mind immediately started to calculate their next steps. They needed operatives skilled in espionage, sabotage, and manipulation. People who could slip past the Eclipsed Hand's watchful eyes and extract critical information without leaving a trace. She knew just the team for the job. "I'll assemble a squad," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll infiltrate Dominion command centers, gather intel, and sabotage any operations we can. If we can get a sense of their plans, we might be able to strike before they're ready." Tran looked between Davy and Vorn, her expression resolute. "It's settled then. We'll play the long game. We'll be ghosts in the shadows, but we'll be watching. And when the time comes, we'll make our move." As the meeting adjourned, Davy felt the weight of the task ahead of her settle in. She was no longer just leading a mission for Earth's survival. She was now at the center of a galaxy-wide conspiracy, fighting against an ancient force with its own designs for the universe. The battle was no longer just about defeating the enemy. It was about finding the heart of the Eclipsed Hand and cutting it out before it consumed everything in its path. The gathering storm had already begun, and humanity's place in the galaxy would be decided in the coming days. The Elysium cut through the void, its engines silent but powerful, as the crew made preparations for their first strike. President Tran had given the green light, and Captain Devi had already selected her team, an elite group of operatives who would infiltrate the heart of the Dominion. Vorn's knowledge of the inner workings of the Dominion was invaluable, but the operation would still be dangerous. Every step had to be calculated, every move planned meticulously. Davy stood at the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of the Dominion's military outposts. The target was clear, one of their top command hubs, where the highest-ranking officers and key leaders operated. This was where they could gather the intelligence they needed to understand the full scope of the Eclipsed Hand's influence. If they could extract key data from this facility, it could give them the upper hand in the fight ahead. The members of her team were gathered around a central table, reviewing the mission parameters. Each one was a specialist in their own field: intelligence, sabotage, close combat, and covert operations. They were humanity's best, and the mission ahead would test their skills like never before. Davy's eyes fell on Lieutenant Mira O'Connell, a seasoned operative who had previously worked with the Elysium's special forces. Her quiet confidence and calm under pressure made her the perfect candidate for leading the team on the ground. Next to her was Sergeant Elias Kane, a demolitions expert who had seen more than his fair share of combat, but was still known for his tactical brilliance. The rest of the team was made up of highly skilled individuals, each handpicked for their ability to carry out high-risk missions with precision. "Captain," O'Connell said, her voice steady, "we've studied the target location. The Dominion facility is heavily fortified, but we've identified several weak points in their security grid. With the right timing, we can infiltrate and extract the data without alerting the entire base." Davy nodded. "I want a quiet strike. No explosions, no alarms. We move in, gather the intel, and leave without anyone knowing we were there. Vorn, you're sure this facility is connected to the Eclipsed Hands operations?" Vorn, who had been silent for most of the briefing, finally spoke. His voice was low, almost grim. "Yes, this is one of their main hubs for coordinating military actions and covert operations. If you can get to the command center, you'll find the evidence we need. But be careful, there are factions within the Dominion who are loyal to the Eclipsed Hand. You may be walking into a nest of vipers." Davy met Vorn's gaze. "We'll be prepared. O'Connell, Kane, make sure your teams are ready. This won't be a long mission, but it will be a delicate one." O'Connell gave a nod of affirmation. "Understood, Captain. We'll be in and out before they even know we were there." The team dispersed to prepare for the mission. Davy watched them go, each of them focused and determined. There was no room for mistakes. The future of the galaxy depended on the success of this operation. If they failed, the Eclipsed Hand's influence would continue to grow, and humanity would be caught in the middle of a war they might not survive. As the Elysian neared the Dominion facility, Davy stood by the viewport, watching the stars streak by. She knew that time was running out. The Eclipsed Hand's reach was already far deeper than they had realized, and every moment of delay brought them closer to catastrophe. If they couldn't find a way to strike back soon, they might lose everything. The ship docked at a remote, unassuming outpost, its stealth systems cloaking it from prying eyes. The team was ready. They had only one chance to succeed. "Operation Black Dawn is a go," Davy said into the comms, her voice steady but carrying the weight of their mission. "Good luck," came the response from Admiral Thorpe. "We're with you." O'Connell and her team made their way to the airlock, their faces hard with focus. It was now or never. The operation was about to begin, and the galaxy's fate rested on the success of this quiet strike. Every decision, every move, would make the difference between victory and defeat. There was no turning back. As the airlock hissed open, and the team moved into the dark corridors of the Dominion facility, the silence of space felt like the calm before a storm. The team had trained for moments like this, but there was no certainty in the unknown. Only the knowledge that failure was not an option. And so, with quiet determination, they began their mission. The corridors of the Dominion facility were cold and sterile, lit by the harsh glow of artificial lights that flickered in places where older systems struggled to maintain their integrity. Davy and her team moved with practiced precision, their footfalls muted against the metal floors. O'Connell led the way, her sharp eyes scanning every corner, while Kane brought up the rear, ensuring that no one would follow them undetected. Davy kept her breath steady, every sense on high alert. The intel had been thorough. They knew the layout of the facility, the security checkpoints, and the locations of critical data servers. But there was no guarantee of success. The deeper they went into the complex, the higher the stakes became. They were on enemy ground, and the Eclipsed Hands agents could be anywhere. O'Connell held up a fist, signaling for the team to stop. Davy stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she examined the security panel in front of her. This checkpoint was rigged with a biometric scanner, something they hadn't anticipated. "Plan B," Davy whispered. "Kane, you're up." Kane stepped forward, his fingers moving quickly over the control panel. He was a demolitions expert, but his skills extended beyond explosives. Hacking into Dominion systems was second nature to him. With a few rapid keystrokes, he bypassed the biometric lock, deactivating the security system with ease. "Good to go," Kane muttered, stepping back and giving O'Connell the signal to proceed. They continued through the maze of corridors, moving quickly but cautiously. Each turn they made took them deeper into the heart of the Dominion's operations. Davy's mind raced through the possible scenarios. What would they find in the command center? Could they trust the intelligence Vorn had given them? The suspicion that there were more agents of the eclipsed hand within the Dominion loomed over them like a shadow. As they approached the command center, O'Connell paused, signaling for everyone to take cover behind a row of crates. Through the security cameras embedded in the walls, they saw 2 Dominion officers patrolling the area, both armed and highly alert. Davy's pulse quickened. This was the critical moment. If they were caught now, everything they had worked for would be lost. She looked to O'Connell, who raised an eyebrow, silently asking for a decision. "Take them out quietly," Davy ordered in a hushed tone. "We move fast." O'Connell nodded and gestured for Kane to prepare. The 2 operatives crept forward, moving like shadows, their actions synchronized. Kane silently incapacitated one of the officers with a tranquilizer dart, while O'Connell used a pressure point to subdue the other. They were professionals, and within moments, both guards were neutralized without a sound. With the guards out of the way, they finally reached the door to the command center. O'Connell planted a small, advanced device against the door, a tool that would silently override the locking mechanism. It clicked open with a soft hiss, revealing the heart of the Dominion's operations. A massive control room filled with terminals, consoles, and bustling officers. But what caught Davy's attention wasn't the number of Dominion personnel in the room. It was the large, glowing terminal at the far end, the one that stood apart from the rest. It pulsed with energy, an ominous, red light casting eerie shadows across the room. That was where the information they needed lay. The team moved in, taking positions around the room. O'Connell and Kane set up an encrypted relay to ensure their communications remained secure. Davy stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the terminal. There was no time to waste. Suddenly, the hum of the facility's systems shifted. An alarm blared. "Damn it!" Kane hissed, his hand reaching for the detonator in his belt, but Davy grabbed his arm, stopping him. "No explosives," she commanded. "We can't blow our cover yet." O'Connell sprinted to the terminal, pulling up a holographic display. "It's encrypted, but not for long." She tapped furiously at the keys, her focus absolute. Each moment they spent in the command center was more dangerous than the last. They had to get the data, and fast. Davy kept an eye on the entrance, listening for approaching footsteps. The security breach was bound to alert Dominion personnel. They had only moments before backup arrived. "I've got it," O'Connell whispered, her voice barely audible. "Data extraction complete. Let's move." But before they could retreat, the sound of approaching soldiers echoed down the hall. "Move now," Davy barked. The team quickly began to fall back, their mission a success. But they weren't safe yet. As they made their way back through the corridors, the sounds of footsteps grew louder. The Dominion was onto them. This wasn't over. They had the intel, but getting out of the facility alive was a whole other battle. The true test of their survival was just beginning. The team rushed through the corridors, the sound of their footsteps now accompanied by the heavy thrum of alarms. Davy's mind raced. The data they had secured was vital, but the escape was the real challenge. The Dominion knew they had breached the command center, and reinforcements were already on their way. The clock was ticking, and every second spent in the facility's halls was a second closer to discovery. Left. O'Connell shouted, directing them toward a service tunnel that would bypass the main hall. Davy nodded, signaling the team to follow. They dashed into the narrow corridor, their footsteps muffled by the high-tech boots designed for stealth operations. It was a tight fit, but the cramped space was better than being caught in the open. Davy glanced at Kane, whose usual calm had been replaced by a tense edge. He clutched his weapon tighter, his gaze constantly scanning the shadows. "Any idea how much time we have?" Davy asked, her voice low. "Maybe 5 minutes," O'Connell replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. "But I'm not counting on the Elysium waiting around forever. We need to be off the station before they call in the big guns." The exit was just ahead, an old cargo bay that led to the ship's docking port. Davy felt a surge of hope. If they could make it there, they would be safe. The Elysium was waiting in orbit, ready to extract them, but only if they could make it to the landing bay. It was their only chance. Suddenly, the low hum of the facility's systems morphed into a harsh, crackling noise, and the unmistakable sound of boots on metal echoed from the corridor behind them. "Here they come," Kane shouted. Without hesitation, Davy reached for the comm unit in her belt. "Elysium, this is Davy. We need immediate extraction now. Approaching cargo bay Delta 4. Do you copy?" The response came almost immediately, but it wasn't the calm voice of Admiral Thorpe. It was a hurried transmission filled with static. "We copy, Captain. But wait. Something's wrong. We've got Dominion ships on approach. They're not responding to hails. You've got to move faster. We can't hold them off for long." Davy's heart sank. The Dominion was closing in, not just on their position inside the facility, but also outside. The battle for their escape had just become a two-front war. "We've got no choice," she muttered under her breath. "We make it to the bay, or we don't make it at all." O'Connell turned, face steely. "Captain, we've got company. 4 armed soldiers up ahead. They're blocking the exit." "Take them out," Davy ordered, her voice sharp and unwavering. "This mission ends here, and we're not going down without a fight." Kane grinned darkly. "This is what I do best." They reached the end of the service tunnel, emerging into a dimly lit corridor. The cargo bay door was only a few meters away, but the 4 Dominion soldiers stationed there had already begun to notice their approach. A standoff. The tension in the air was palpable. O'Connell stepped forward, her hand reaching for the tranquilizer gun strapped to her thigh. In one smooth motion, she fired a dart into the first soldier's neck. The man slumped to the floor without a sound, and the rest of the team immediately followed suit, taking down the remaining soldiers with precision and speed. Davy moved to the door, her pulse hammering in her ears. Go, now. With a final push, the team made it into the cargo bay. The Elysium's landing ramp was just beyond the massive steel doors, but the situation outside had gone from bad to worse. Dominion ships, armed and ready for combat, were now swarming the area. Their chances of getting off the planet were growing slimmer by the second. "Elysium, we need immediate evac," Davy yelled into the comms. "Now, damn it." The doors to the bay opened just as the first blaster shot rang out, but the Elysium was already descending through the atmosphere, a sleek, dark figure against the burning orange sky. It wasn't just coming for them, it was coming to fight. Kane swore under his breath. "They're not giving up. We need to make it to the ship, fast." The team sprinted across the open cargo bay, weapons raised, as blaster fire rained down from the approaching Dominion forces. But the Elysium was close now, its defensive systems activating as it laid down cover fire, taking out enemy ships with pinpoint accuracy. Davy's heart raced as she and her team reached the ramp. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting them into the sky just as the Dominion forces arrived. There was a flash of light as an explosion rocked the ground beneath them, sending a shockwave that nearly threw them off balance. The Elysium shot upward, breaking through the atmosphere and into the safety of space. Davy's breath came in ragged gasps as she watched the chaotic battle below them. But they had made it. They had survived. And they had won. As the stars stretched out before them, Davy allowed herself a rare moment of relief. But the mission wasn't over, not by a long shot. The real fight was just beginning. They had the information they needed, and now it was time to take the fight to the eclipsed hand. The galaxy would know their name, and humanity would stand united against the darkness. The Crimson Accord had begun.